The Mac and Pete Project.
All right, we kind of hit the middle of the season. We have a couple episodes we really don't want to talk about. We'll just mention them briefly. The Dolphin, which is a Wesley episode of all things.
Yeah,
It's a shapeshifter. But
very similar to a TOS episode where they were transporting a female delegate to a planet to be a bride. Almost same episode, same feel. It was okay.
And this episode also came out a year or so before Star Trek 6. So basically, this might have been the first shifter.
Anyway, Martia.
Next episode is the Contagion. All I kind of want to mention is when we go to talk about Deep Space Nine. This is where we first learn about the aliens, ancient civilization that built basically stargates.
Yeah, is essentially what they were. And overall, it was one of those old feeling TOS episodes. You have an alien race, you have a fight against the Romulans or another, and it was an adventure. So it was good, but it wasn't. So yeah.
The DS9 episodes, I think, a little bit more fun. The Royale's a funny episode because it's basically they find the remnants of a late or early 21st century NASA spacecraft in orbit.
Yeah.
And for some reason, the planet below took on the wanted to take care of the astronauts that passed away. And for some reason, the astronaut had a really bad novel, the Casino Royale. Or not the Casino Royale, but just the Royale.
And the Royale.
It
was kind of a holodeck episode without the holodeck.
Yeah.
And not a very good holodeck episode.
And Times Squared, I want to say, has a really nice special effect. So
yeah,
that's good if you're talking about the special effects when talking about the positive of Star Trek episode.
That's a good one.
It's I want to say it's the dry run of doing cause and effect of doing time.
Which was a great episode.
So we'll save that for then and do a little comparison. And I think, Mac, you want to talk about the Icarus Factor.
The reason I want to talk about Icarus Factor is because there's, like we talked about earlier, another Riker-centric episode. But you get introduced to Riker's father, Kyle Riker, and then you get introduced to not just Kyle and Will's relationship, but Kyle and Dr. Pulaski have a pre-existing relationship. And then you get this sense that their relationship isn't so good, Will and his dad. So you have a healing story going on there, along with they open with Picard talking about he's going to take a new command. Long story short, he doesn't take the command. He fixes his relationship with his father, and we never really see Riker and his dad again, to my knowledge, or even talked about. But it was one of those, if you like Riker, it was a good episode to catch up on Riker. Was there another story beyond that, Pete? I'm not remembering a secondary story with somebody else.
I'm trying to. Oh, yes. Which I also.
think Wesley. That the secondary story was good.
No.
Worf's ascension.
Yeah. So Wesley notices Worf is having a bad day, which nobody else really does because it's Worf, and basically Wesley talks to Geordi and Data and it's like, we got to figure out what's going on. And Geordi's like, or Data's actually like, nope, that's your job. You found the problem, you fix it. And then
it's actually kind of ironic because if we just for a second touch on DS9, there's an episode where there's a ceremony that Worf is in and Chief O'Brien gets to participate in. And Chief O'Brien is also participating in this one. So that's kind of, it's an interesting parallel. I don't know if they meant to do it or because it was one of those where why did they bring Chief? Because at this point, Chief O'Brien is not he's a red shirt.
We didn't talk about him this season, but he's now wearing his yellow shirt, and
he's in a yellow shirt. He's now in operations. He's not in command anymore. And I like Chief O'Brien. I mean, he's a good character. He and Worf are similar, where they've both been a part of 2 different series.
Yep.
Oh.
Wesley finds out this is the anniversary of his rite of ascension in Klingon culture that apparently is very important. And his family members, he's supposed to celebrate with other Klingons, and his family members are supposed to come watch. And
you get tased.
Worf feels he doesn't have any family on the Enterprise, and they're like, well, we're his family, and we're going to recreate this on the holodeck for him. So,
yeah, and that was a good secondary storyline.
Yeah, and for me personally, I like that more. When you're looking back on it, if, like you said, Riker now goes by the wayside and he's now a punchline when it comes to the latter of season 3, at the end of season after Best of Both Worlds, where now, if you would have turned that upside down, Worf is more important because his character goes through 2 different series. Yeah.
When you look at it from that standpoint, the secondary storyline is more important now. But that's a hindsight look. But overall, the Worf story was better. But they focused on the Picard, the Riker storyline.
I always hated you for that. Damn it, Will!
Not much to say about this episode, but it's just a favorite of mine. Pen pals, basically Data's. I kind of want to attribute this to like a homage to ham radio, of people just listening out there and talking to people, trying to make friends.
I've always wanted a ham radio set. And now that I've got one, I'm going to listen in on distress signals and notify the authorities and prevent disasters and noble things like that.
Basically, Data's just monitoring the frequencies, and he notices a intelligent pattern of radio waves coming from a planet. And at first, you see radio waves in space, you don't think anything of it, but if there's a pattern to it, it's like that's a sign of intelligence. So he's curious. So it turns out he's been talking to a 8-year-old girl whose planet's falling apart, and she's crying out for help.
Yes.
Has no idea where Data is, doesn't understand, or the species doesn't even understand what a spaceship would be, or people traveling. But before I get ahead of myself, the other thing I like about this episode is you see Picard doing something on the holodeck that's not Dixon Hill. And we see a hobby of horse riding. So he's relaxing and gets the bad news from Data that he's been talking to this girl, and Picard's perturbed, and he's like, does she know where you're at? He's like, no, I've kept that end vague. And he's like, all right, cease all communications. And as you have it, they've been studying the star cluster and noticing a lot of planets in the star cluster are having similar problems with their tectonic stresses. And this is where we link up with the B story of Wesley Crusher getting his first command of basically doing a geology study of all the planets in the system and trying to see what's causing this phenomenon. So these end up linking together.
And that's another thing that I like when they take 2 storylines that I like. That's good character build.
Yeah. And so Wesley's learning how to take command, and these people are at least a decade older than him, and he's doubtful of his abilities. he's meeting with Troy and Riker. Is like, how do I accomplish this? And he's like, what's your problems? Like, they're older than me. And Riker's like, you're relevant. You're in command. It's only an issue if you make it one. But essentially, since this is a pre-warp civilization, they're not supposed to interfere with the natural development and evolution of a planet. And so they're having a staff meeting. They were debating it. Pulaski's the human heart because she's the doctor. And she's like, that's the voice crying out for help. My emotions are involved. We're involved. We have to do something. We can't just ignore it.
My emotions are involved. Data's friend is going to die. That means something.
To Data.
Does that invalidate the emotion?
Picard tells Data to cease all communications, block the frequencies, and as he's doing it, another transmission's coming in. You hear the girl begging for help, and Picard stops him, sighs, and be like, "Oh, Data."
Are you?
Wait. Data. Your whisper from the dark has now become a plea.
Yeah, the one thing I like about that moment is you almost get the feeling that Data, who is super quick, he almost delays to because he knows if Picard hears this, it's going to be a more human, this is going to make the point for me. So it's like, so I get that feeling from Data when I watch that.
So as they're moving in to fix the problems, of course, there's going to be some quakes, and Data asks to go down to the planet to make sure, because he hasn't heard from his friend, wants to make sure everything's okay. And he discovers that I think her family went to go to a shelter, but she left the shelter to go talk on the radio to find Data. And he realizes she's not going to survive in this shelter. And he brings her aboard the Enterprise. And Chief O'Brien's like, what are you doing? And then he takes her to the bridge. And I don't understand how Data survived that. Bringing a child from a underdeveloped alien race onto the bridge.
He has brought a child onto my ship.
And then he's like tries to get Troy to take the child off the bridge, and she won't go because she only will stay near Data. And then Picard's like, fine, just keep her nearby. This involves her. So she gets to see her planet from space, gets to see them fix her planet. Everyone's happy. And then Picard's like, Pulaski, I need you to wipe her memory. And then,
well, the funny thing about that is either it's really dangerous to wipe someone's memory, or it wasn't written very well, where if you were going to, like, Picard would have been like, we'll just wipe her memory, let her stay there. You know what I mean? So, or it's this is a new extraterrestrial, we're not familiar with their physiology. But that's, in that moment, that's what I'm thinking,
And I also feel like a child of her age, like, yeah, maybe it would have been a little bit traumatizing. Like, no one would believe her.
Yeah.
But it's like, I don't know, maybe the right call. If you can wipe the memory, maybe that's best.
Yeah. So.
But yeah, I like it. Nice little episode showing Data's growth once again. Little baby steps.
But are we doing a good thing now, Doctor?
This is to protect her as much as us.
By robbing her of her memories.
To remember you and this ship would complicate her future. She has to be the person she was born to be.
Now who are we going to talk about?
Who?
Who? Q-Who! That's who!
So what? Q's back, kidnaps Picard, and Picard's like, you swore you would never interfere with us again on this ship. And he's like, well, we're not on your ship. We're out here in a shuttlecraft. And he's basically begging Picard to let him become part of his crew because apparently he's not technically a part of the continuum. He might be on hiatus, might be timed out, something.
Whatever the Q do.
Yeah. And then we find out Guinan and Q have a history.
That's probably one of the biggest parts of that episode. So they, of course, are in the shuttlecraft, and then all of a sudden, Picard's like, "Oh, come on, Q, really? All right, well, this is a better plan." And all of a sudden, you see Guinan pop up, walk around, and no, I thought and this the little reaction that they have together, and just the little. We've had dealings in the past, and the reason that this episode's so important, not just you get another layer to Q, you get more of what Guinan is, but then what does Q do?
And where she goes, trouble always follows.
He slings them 7,000 light years to encounter the Borg.
We'll just have to see how ready you are.
Q!
As you said,
Bam.
7,000 light years away. They get first planet they come across. They see it's a highly developed world, and Data notices where a city should be. There's just cliffs.
There's a series of roads on this planet which indicates a highly industrialized civilization. But where there should be cities, there are only great rips in the surface.
It is as though some great force just scooped all the machine elements off the face of the planet.
All the roads lead to Rome.
Yeah,
but Rome ain't there.
And strangely enough, it's the same thing from last season where all the colonies along the neutral zone were scooped up.
Disappearing. Yeah.
So we think we may have found who's been doing that. We come across this humongous cube-shaped vessel, and slowly they invade engineering. They're single drones ignoring them. Picard tells Worf to deal with it, and Worf does the best thing and tells his subordinate to deal with it. Subordinate gets thrown across the room. Worf pulls out a phaser, kills the drone, and immediately sends another drone to take up where he was going. Worf fires a phaser, now has a shield. It's adapted.
Yeah. And that's when we get the first, idea where these guys are more serious. They're a little bit more sinister. But we still don't know a lot yet. It's still it's a mystery.
And
it's a mystery.
Basically, those first two were sent for intelligence, and then the Borg introduce themselves over the comm, tells them, "We've analyzed your systems. You cannot resist us. If you do so, you will be punished," and leave it at that. First attack, I believe, ends up killing, 41 crew members on the Enterprise?
Either that or 14. I remember the number 4 and number 1. I don't remember the exact number. But they cut into the hull, didn't they? In the saucer section.
Yeah.
And then they pulled.
Oh wait, was that it? Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry, I'm misremembering.
There's a lot of episodes where the Borg decide to take a cutting beam to the hull of a ship.
Yeah.
But they cut into the saucer section. They pull 4 or 5 decks out, just in a tube like.
So yeah. They respond, and Picard has them because they're being held in place by a tractor beam. They fired the source of the power of the tractor beam, and actually do a lot of damage to the ship. You can actually see it.
Yeah, you see around. It's almost like holes being cut in the way that the phaser cuts through the hull. That was a good effect. I like that.
And then doing the Starfleet thing, instead of running away, they're like, "Well, they're disabled. We need to go learn more about them." And Guinan's like, "Are you crazy?
Do you know what these people did to ours?
So they go aboard, start studying, seeing how drone-like they are and how they ignore them, and apparently during this whole entire time they're more focused on fixing their ship than dealing with the intruders because the intruders aren't a threat to them. And then probably the other creepy scene I remember from childhood is seeing the baby Borg in the drawer.
From the look of it, the Borg are born as a biological life form. It seems that almost immediately after birth, they begin artificial implants.
That was a skin crawler. It was like, ooh.
And then it's like, oh, it looks like the Borg are born biologically and then are
modified later.
Must immediately start adding implants. And then it's like, they kind of changed that later. Because it's like, you don't really see Borg babies being grown later.
Well, the other thing is that might have been, because there's fan theories out there like
an experiment.
There's a first couple episodes like the TOS where the Nomad went to the world that was all computers. You had the motion picture where V'ger. So there's ideas that they might have been the Borg or the source of where the Borg was. And then so there were they all machines and then they added biology later? Who knows? I mean, that's something they could delve into. But they might have grown babies and then added, or maybe there was a nanite thing going on which was talked about in Voyager a ton. But
the important thing to note is the word assimilation was not used until later. So eventually the ship starts powering back up and they're like, we got to get out of here. Everyone gets back on board. They're hightailing it back to the closest starbase, which is going to take 2 years at maximum warp. And then Q comes back. He's like, you need me. And they're like, they're going to chase you down until you run out of fuel. They will beat you and will not give up.
You wanted me to say, I need you? I need you!
You don't know what's out there. You're advancing too far, too fast, too far, too soon. And he's like, I think this is a lesson we could have learned without the death of our crew. And he's like, oh, if you can't handle a bloody nose, go back to Earth.
Yeah, that was a good line.
And then this is when you start to realize Q is not just this menace or nemesis to Picard. He's actually, in a very weird way, helping him. Because he even says it to Riker. It's like, without this knowledge, without having it, how can we even prepare for such a thing?
This is probably the first episode that you get the feeling that, yeah, he's a little bit of an irritation, but he's kind of harmless. Besides the death of the crew members, let's add that caveat.
Yeah.
But he, without that knowledge, without
let's fast forward a year from now. In Star Trek universe, without that experience, like 359 was horrible.
It was horrible then. I couldn't imagine it now. We could have had a fast forward directly to Star Trek First Contact and see, Earth already, assimilated completely. But who knows?
If you can't take a little bloody nose, maybe you ought to go back home and crawl under your bed. It's not safe out here.
We just have a few more episodes left we want to talk about. Just briefly, next episode that aired was the Samaritan Snare. And
nothing really important besides a Picard caveat, and then the Packlins get introduced.
My friend, his name is Reginald.
Think I can meet him?
He is Reginald.
You get to know more about Picard's past, about where we'll see this more in detail in the Tapestry.
Yep.
how that all happened. So maybe we'll probably brush a little bit more on it then.
Yeah, but I think it's really interesting to note, if you listen to what he says in this episode, how well it matches to what they used in Tapestry. So it's like they were paying attention to their own canon.
A trio of Nausicans came in. They were clearly spoiling for a confrontation with a group of fresh-faced Starfleet officers such as ourselves.
So,
which is always good for us guys who like to delve in.
We need things. You are smart.
Things to make us go.
We need you. Okay.
Thanks, fellas.
In fact, I do actually remember that I laughed out loud.
Up the ladder?
Yeah.
Up the long ladder.
Probably the second weakest episode of the whole series. Not as bad as Code of Honor, but this does not do any favors to the Irish.
No, and someone asked being part Irish as myself, and I will speak for me and Chief O'Brien. Yeah, it wasn't great. Wasn't great.
All I want to say, general synopsis: we have 2 Earth colonies that late 21st, early 22nd century go out. They ending up in different planets. One ends up with all the supplies, but it's only 5 people, and the other planet, where the majority of the population ended up, had just the rudiments to survive. So they basically create 17th century Ireland in space. And the Enterprise comes, rescues them. And then they're like, oh, what about the other colony? And they're like, what other colony? And they find out this other colony is like super advanced, almost at the same level as Earth is, just totally isolated. But there's only 5 people on the colony. Or they see 5. They see more than 5 people, but it's just clones of the original 5 crew members.
Well, the best part about this episode is, do you remember the Family Guy episode where they're Ireland is now this futuristic world, almost Atlantis, and all of a sudden they're like, we're inventing energy. We're going to take a pure distilled energy for human. We're going to call it whiskey.
Whiskey.
That's what this episode is.
Yeah.
One of them invented whiskey and the other one didn't. And, they're all Irish, but, that's...
Worf teaches them to get unlimited whiskey from the replicator.
Whiskey! That's what I call a wee drop of the creature.
And that he tries the blood wine. Oh no, that's the there. Oh, and probably the only other highlight of the episode's the daughter.
And then, so basically, the society that is made of clones, they're having a genetic fading or clone fade. I forgot how they put it.
Yeah.
They need new genetic material before they can't sustain themselves and they'll just die. So they try to steal some DNA from Riker and Pulaski. Riker kills the clone, which no one ever talks about him committing murder.
Stop!
But
or is it suicide?
I think it would be murder, but but yeah, basically they resolved the episode by sending all the space Irish to go live with the cloners so they can get enough genetic material, and so every woman can have 5 husbands.
5, did you say?
I bet he had. And what'd you say his job was? I bet he has more than 2 coins to rub together.
Do you not like girls?
Of course I do. Oh, is there a special technique to this foot washing?
Manhunt. Loxana's back. She's going through Beta Z menopause, which quadruples the sex drive. And the other only thing I want to say about this episode is we got some Fleetwood Mac.
It's fishy, Fleetwood.
I don't think there's anything else to talk about. Picard's on the holodeck again, and Luxana doesn't realize it's a holodeck.
Yeah. I would say that the alien design was good. That was the only highlight of the episode. Oh, and Worf's throwaway line.
What a handsome race.
This is the second time where you see a Constellation class starship. That's the Stargazer is a Constellation class, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct.
And that's the second time we see it. And Riker is assigned, and he's supposed to take a crew on board.
Yeah.
And he ends up picking Wes, Worf, and Jordan.
So basically, we have this alien from the Zakdoran race. First time we see them later.
Mm-hmm.
Season 7. But Kohlrami, I think is the...
That's correct.
And basically, he's here from Starfleet. They want to do some war games, and Kohlrami is a very intelligent person. He's like one of the best tacticians and strategists. And Picard doesn't want to do this because he's like, Starfleet's not a military. We're here for exploration. But he finally gave in because it's like, we need to deal with the Borg threat. So we need to get some practice. So that's our A story. Our B story is Dr. Pulaski pushing Data to compete, playing space chess is what I'm going to call it, with the Zakdoran. Or instead of using his race, we'll call him Kohlrami. So yeah, initially Riker plays for like 8 seconds and loses. And then Pulaski gets Data to challenge him. And Data loses to him. And
he doesn't do much better. It's like 30 seconds.
And Data goes into depression. Because
Android depression.
Yeah. Because he feels like he removed himself from bridge duty because he's like, how can the captain trust me if I cannot beat the guy at space chess? And so he's down. But who gets him out of it? I think Troy does. Gets his hopes up to get him back on the bridge and be like, just because you weren't good at this game doesn't mean you're actually malfunctioning. But we'll get over the starship that Riker has is the Hathaway for the war game. And basically it's what do you say, a 20-year-old ship, doesn't have warp drive, no minimal weapons, defend yourself. Because the goal of this game is when you have the more powerful ship, you're expected to win. When you're at a disadvantage, it's going to take true skill to actually prove anything. So we see that the crystals and engineering are fractured and not much of anything. And Wesley's like, hey, I have this experiment on the Enterprise. I can probably re-crystallize these. So he sneaks back aboard the Enterprise under the guise he had to do something for a school project, and very cleverly sneaks something back over to give them a tactical advantage. And Riker's upset with him. He's like, you cheated. And he's like, no, you told me to improvise.
And I did.
And then cracked a smile. So as expected, I've probably seen this a mile away. Of course, the Enterprise does not have real weapons engaged. They have a combat training system in place so that the weapons do not have power to them. So any script writer would have done the same exact thing. While they're engaged in the middle of their war game routine, some Ferengi come in.
Throw some Ferengis in there.
Because, of course, they're confused. Actually, I forgot to mention, Riker, they were able to pull off a pretty interesting hit on the Enterprise because they were using a hologram of a Romulan to trick them, and it impressed. I already forgot his name.
Kohlrami.
Yeah,
Full weapon systems.
Disengage modified.
Lock on. Open a hailing frequency.
I can't, sir. There's nothing there.
Then the Ferengi come in.
And they're confused because they're like, why is this powerful Federation vessel
Shooting on the lesser?
Yeah. And they're like, well, of course, they're driven by profit.
Where's the profit in that?
And they're like, clearly there's something valuable on that ship that they want. So they want it. And once again, the Ferengi is being played by Armin Shimmerman.
Why was your ship combative with another Federation vessel of lesser design?
So I think he's played a total of 3 Ferengi now.
3 Ferengi at this point, yeah.
So basically, the Enterprise doesn't have weapons to defend itself against the Ferengi because they're wired up for war games. So while they're given 10 minutes, they basically contact the Hathaway and they're like, okay, we have this plan. We're able to get only 4 torpedoes up and running. So we're going to fire 4 torpedoes at you. And during that time, you're going to fire your warp engines, which you said you have 2 seconds of warp energy for. So we're going to make it look like
we blew you up.
And we're going to use the same trick that you just used to convince the Ferengi another Federation ship is approaching, which makes them tuck tail and run. So.
And it works.
Fire.
Destroy your own rather than suffer the ignominy of defeat and capture?
And the episode wraps up with Data re-challenging Chlorami at Space Chess.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone's gathering around in 10 forward. And Worf mentions no one has ever played this game as long as you have. And this is the longest it's ever gone. And I don't know why I can't remember his name.
Kilrami.
Yeah. And then Kilrami actually never finishes the game. He gets frustrated, throws it off.
Just throw it off and
cheating, and then walks away. Everyone cheers, and they're like, that's the longest that game's ever gone. How did you do it? And Data's like, well, once I realized he was playing to win, and he was expecting me to play to win, I realized all I had to do was just keep the game going. So instead of taking advantages to lead to a path to victory, I just took the lesser route to prolong the game.
And a stalemate the whole time.
Yep. And then you're like, well, you won, Data. He's like, no, technically I didn't win. I busted him up. It's fun because you see him cracking a smile and almost telling a joke on purpose. And it's like, just another baby step, like in the previous episode of the season.
Towards his humanity.
I did not win.
Data.
I busted him up.
And here's the bread and butter, what should have been the season finale of season 2.
The Emissary.
The Emissary.
Premise of the episode. Klingon Empire, many years ago, sent at least one ship we know for sure out of cryogenic sleep, basically to wake them up when they needed. And basically this ship of Klingons believes the Federation and Klingons are still at war.
Correct.
And they need to get there before they go and attack the first Federation outpost they see. And closest Klingon ship is 2 days behind the Enterprise. And basically the Enterprise picks up a space probe traveling at warp 9 to pick up a passenger to help them out. And who's on board?
This would be the Klingon ambassador, or should I say the Federation ambassador to Kronos. But this later becomes a love interest, or as we found out, someone who's familiar with Worf already. What's her name, Pete? Kalar or Kalar. So Kalar comes on board, and you're of course surprised because not only is she Klingon, but she's a rather attractive Klingon, and
she's half human.
She's half human, and we get the idea very early that her and Worf have had a pre-existing relationship, because he's very combative, and Picard even brings up, do you have a problem, Lieutenant, or professionally, or is it? He goes, and as Worf normally does, he puts his personal feelings aside to get the job done, and he says, "I have no problem. I'll do it." So you get more information with them.
We forgot to mention, Kalar basically said the only way to solve this predicament is, Picard, you have to destroy the ship.
And Picard, of course, is, hey, we don't do that. We're gonna find a non-violent solution to the problem, and then that leads into, go ahead, work with Worf, which leads into what we just talked about. But then they go and they start gathering ideas, gathering intel. But pretty much the whole episode is Kalar and Worf rekindling their romance.
Yeah. So their first meeting, they don't come up with any productive. Worf is frustrated. Everyone on the bridge can tell he's upset, and Picard tells them, "Go relax."
Yeah.
And here at the same time, Kalar is upset. She smashes the table in her room. Troy walks in traditional Star Trek fashion, doesn't knock, just comes in to a personal quarter. And it's like, oh, I find it relaxing to use the exercise programs on the holodeck to relax.
As opposed to breaking tables. Just saying.
So she goes in, she looks up calisthenics, and then she sees Worf has a program. So she goes and activates it. Meanwhile, Worf was just told to go relax. And of course, he's going to the holodeck to go beat up.
To do the same thing.
And he sees it's already running. And so they go in, they fight him off. And she's like, well, that wasn't that hard. He pulls out a sword. He's like, level 2. Then they fight those off. And then we cut the commercial break, and we come back, and true 1980s TV fashion, it's like, of course, they just had sex on the holodeck.
You don't like people with a
Bazinga.
And then Worf takes this to mean that they are now mated, and wants Kalar to take the oath, and she's like, that is such antiquated, and Worf's like, our traditions mean nothing to you? And they're like, they're not my traditions, I'm also human. And it's like, it was nothing. And this just infuriates him.
It's blowing off some steam, man.
And then we get further to the Klingon ship. It's eventually decloaking, and we see that they're no longer in cryogenic sleep. They're actually awake. So we have some century-old Klingons to deal with.
And my favorite Klingon ship, the D7.
Yeah. And then for once, Worf comes up with a clever idea. And basically, he makes it look like him and Kalar have taken over this Federation vessel. And told him to stand down. And they basically,
I can waste no more time on you.
Yeah. And he sends Kalar over to take them back to the Empire to get them familiar with the 24th century.
Mm-hmm.
And then
welcome to the 24th century.
Worf is ready to just send her away without saying goodbye. And then she finally breaks down on the...
I lied, yeah.
Yeah, she's like, it didn't mean anything. I'm into you. And basically, we're both career driven. So it's like, it's not going to work. But it's like, it's something I want to do. And,
she makes it seem like she's going to come back. And of course, we know she does. But the exchange was, I think, amicable. The departure was amicable.
Mm-hmm.
But that should have been, especially now that we've seen retrospective, that Worf's character was far more developed than Riker or anybody else's. So that one definitely should have been a season finale.
Maybe someday. When our paths cross again, I won't be so easy to get rid of.
Next time on the Mac and Pete Project, we continue our retrospective on Star Trek The Next Generation in Season 3. See you then.